Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter 314 or 314. My name is Jono Logan, and I'm back. I got my voice back. Sort of. I've had a cough for about a month straight, and that's kind of sucked. It really took a toll on my body. And I woke up this morning with a slightly scratchy throat, so I'm a little bit lower than I usually will be today. But I am back now. I'm super excited to start talking about the games of 2025. We've already had what might end up being the biggest and arguably most overdue announcement of the year, with Nintendo releasing a trailer for the Switch 2 earlier last week, and we're going to be chatting a little bit about that later. So here with me today are Wes.
Hi, everybody.
And Abe.
Hey, here with a cup of black coffee that says black as midnight on a moonless night.
Yes, I was going to talk about that later in the episode. If you both want to share some thoughts at the end, I would be happy to give you that time.
All right.
But let's move on to slightly happier fare, the slaughter of hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of NPCs with Dynasty Warriors Origins. So a little bit of background. The Dynasty Warriors series, it started in 1997. It was a one-on-one fighting game for the PlayStation, a dramatically different game than it eventually evolved into with Dynasty Warriors 2, which transitioned into a form that we more recognize now, which is a large-scale battlefield combat. The roots of the series are in Chinese history. It's heavily inspired by the Chinese novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is a retelling of massive conflicts in ancient China. And the game itself is identifiable instantly by its look when you play it. It popularized the Muso genre, where a player takes control of a super powerful hero that is able to defeat literally hundreds of other foes on the battlefield with a single swipe. And this creates these massive epic adventures. However, there has not been a new entry in this series, at least not a new mainline entry in this series, for a good number of years now. We have gotten some creative spin-offs that include Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, and Fire Emblem Warriors, which combines the signature gameplay of the Dynasty Warriors series with those IPs. People tend to think about this game as a super addictive. Frankly, I mean, almost every game is a power fantasy, but when you want to come down to what a power fantasy really is, it's a single swipe of your sword knocking down hundreds upon hundreds of people. That being said, it really hasn't evolved that much, as I understand it, over the last good many years, but that may have changed with this one. So, Wes, let's talk about that for a sec before we dive into Dynasty Warriors Origins. You're a massive fan of this series, but it has, up until now, it got a little stagnation set in, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's interesting. It definitely has that reputation, and some of it is earned. But that's not to say that it hasn't taken some big swings in the past. The problem is that the big swings haven't been any good, so they've quickly retreated back into the shell of here's where comfort is, here's where home is.
The big swings did not knock over hundreds of foes or hundreds of dollars worth of sales.
Exactly. Because it's this interesting history. Like you said, it started out as a fighting game. In Japan, they're a little bit more separated as a series, but there's still this long-running history of, like, in Japan, I believe it's Sangoku Muso, and then Shin Sangoku Muso is where they pick up with what we now think of as the Dynasty Warriors series. So we're always a number ahead of them, because when you add Shin to something, sometimes it's easier in English to just call it, well, that's the next one. It's the new one. So ever since we switched over to the Dynasty Warriors 2 and beyond, it really has been this concept of, okay, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, it's this big old cast that we can continually grow, give them all these new weapons, but because we're going to be working anywhere from like 30 plus to 70 plus, controllable officers, everything's going to feel very much the same. If you press square, 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 triangle, you're going to get a group clearing effect. Square, square, triangle, it's going to be something single target, usually multi-hit or stun. There are these built-in rules that you just understand as part of the series. And that has led to this feeling of stagnation from some. The things that have evolved, a lot of the time, have been things that you won't notice unless you're a big fan of the series. Because, Dynasty Warriors 7 took big swings with its storytelling, and the weapon switching that would continue into Dynasty Warriors 8 does fundamentally change how you interact with the game from a moment-to-moment standpoint. But at the end of the day, you have this giant battlefield, you are the wrecking ball, and you have to go to where you're needed most. And the challenge isn't in the one-on-one combat. The challenge is in making sure that, like, oh, this officer stays alive or this objective gets met. It's a lot less about like this character action kind of feel and a lot more about this. I can mercilessly take down as many people as I want. How do I divide my time the best? Which I think is a more addictive gameplay cycle than some people give it credit for. But also, there's no doubt that can get repetitive, especially to a non-fan. And the times that they have really tried to break out of it in the mainstream were Dynasty Warriors 6 and Dynasty Warriors 9. Both of those, well, Dynasty Warriors 6 still maintained some of the feel of that, like, you're a big wrecking ball, go from place to place to exude your presence. But unfortunately, they simplified an already very simple combat system and took it from roughly 2 buttons to 1 button. And that combo just got stronger the more and more enemies that you defeated in a row. So that one kind of went over like a lead balloon. And as a result of this big change, you could still play as a lot of the characters, but they started duplicating weapons. So all of a sudden, a fan favorite who used claws is using a spear. And all of the more interesting weapons got sidelined because they had to do so much work to rethink how this entire combo system worked, that they kind of had to re-go from formula. They've done this a few times in the series where they take all these unique characters and kind of homogenize them, and then in the next game they start to stratify them out a little bit. But the last game that we got in Dynasty Warriors 9 back in 2018 was a pretty colossal failure. It was it very much hopped on the open world trend as the open world trend was losing steam. It wasn't a very good quality version of the open world trend, and it took away that immediacy that you get from a Dynasty Warriors game where, oh no, something's going wrong on this side of the map, I've got to get there. When you expand the size of that, you kind of lose some of that tension because they can't say, oh no, someone's being attacked on this side of the map, because it takes you like 10 minutes to get to that side of the map. And then, they changed the combat system, which had some goods, some bads, but ultimately kind of oversimplified things again. They duplicated move sets again. They just did a lot to make this into probably the worst received mainline Dynasty Warriors game that they have had yet. So they definitely kind of put their heads back in their shells for 7 years.
To figure it out.
To figure it out again.
Well, what's interesting about this one, first off, you gave it a 93, so you loved it. But also, this is not unique. The game seems to have gotten, acclaim pretty much everywhere, but also it's been doing very well on Steam, apparently. Very, very well on Steam. I'm just looking at a couple of articles here. It's the second top selling game on Steam's worldwide rankings. It's doing extraordinarily well in Japan. So, like, whatever they figured out here, and however those 7 years have paid off.
Oh, absolutely. That was maybe my biggest shock on review day, because even though I didn't play the most optimized version of the game, I still adored it. We're going to
get to that.
We will absolutely have to. Still absolutely adored it. Quickly became, recency bias in mind and all, probably my favorite in the mainline series, and it's a contender for, including all the spinoffs. Because it did so much unique, but it did it so well. And the biggest surprise was logging in on that Monday morning and seeing, oh my God, everyone agrees with me. Like, we're seeing high scores from IGN and from places that normally do not appreciate the series at all. This seems to be the one that's cracked through to an audience that's not just the prior fans, which is exciting.
Well, let's talk about some of the reasons why it may have cracked through. Personally, when I looked at the series, my interest in the series was not in Dynasty Warriors. It was in Hyrule.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, pretty much. But even there, the number of playable characters was daunting, to put it mildly. And that's something that Dynasty Warriors is known for. Like, literally
Absolutely.
dozens upon dozens of playable characters that you can choose and play. And in a way, that's actually might be a legacy of its fighting game origins. But with this game, they've scaled it back. They've focused on a single protagonist that doesn't have a name. It's you, essentially. It really has deepened a lot of its combat mechanics. It has a lot deeper RPG mechanics, which is one of the reasons why we are covering it. and it has a lot fewer weapons. So in a lot of ways, they seem to have scaled it back. But by scaling it back, they have focused what works about the series.
You know, when you look at the series in the past, one of the things that's in some ways beloved about it, it is very much a turn your brain off and just kind of live kind of game.
It's fascinating you say that. Like whenever I watch combat from a Dynasty Warriors game, my immediate thought is Vampire Survivors, just like that kind of massive, like being surrounded by enemies and you are just demolishing them with very little effort in many cases.
That strange phenomena of like relaxing chaos that you can get from a handful of games. It absolutely appealed to that part for a lot of fans. But it was very much like the pool was broad but shallow. You were playing in a very large kiddie pool the whole time. Which, don't get me wrong, I have adored for ages. I love going through and like, okay, I've finished max leveling Sun Ce. Let's see what Jotai has to say. Like, going through this entire cast, it gave you a lot of time to play. Yeah, all that time was pretty much the exact same kind of experience, but it was so relaxing, so simple and calming that there was a real appeal to that. But honestly, I feel like with Dynasty Warriors 8, they kind of perfected that. They didn't have a lot of room to grow. And yeah, they might make more like that in the future. They might make a proper Dynasty Warriors 10. They've said that this is kind of mainline, kind of not for Origins.
Depends on how it does, I would imagine.
Yeah, and it sounds like we'll get onto this, but they're almost certainly making more in this series, at least. Whether or not they spin off to a separate 10 is up in the air, I suppose. But this is much more like, yeah, they shrunk the pool, but it's so much deeper. Like all of a sudden you've got like a diving pool, because you've only got 8 weapons, but man, do those 8 weapons feel different from each other, and do they have really robust progression tracks, and there's just so much more to every element. And all of a sudden this 2-button game is having you do perfect dodges and parries and using tactics and battle arts. Like you're using the whole controller for the first time in the series. And it feels like in order to succeed, you have to do so, which is even wilder to me.
Well, so despite the fact that it only has like one playable character, which does dramatically focus it, that's not saying that it does not have a fairly massive cast of characters. Like they can pull a lot from the book. And in this particular case, I guess the generals would be the previous playable characters, but now they are your supporting cast, and you can actually. I don't want to say it's inspired by Persona, because it's probably not.
But that's where everyone's brain goes, right?
Yeah, you can have bonding with these generals to get insights into who they are. Which can deepen the game, because there are 3 different paths you can take in this.
Correct. You have the traditional 3 kingdoms, where a lot of times you would have a story mode that would take you through one of the kingdoms. Well, now you choose which kingdom you're going through for your character. So Wei, Wu, and Shu are all open to you, as well as potential small divergent paths throughout each of those. That adds a lot of that replayability that people were used to from the older games. But also gives you a much deeper look at like the philosophy behind each one of those kingdoms, which is something I enjoyed. And then those bonding moments. A lot of characters who were kind of caricatures and had that one note. They're still more than human in a lot of ways. They're still these legendary figures, but you get a lot more understanding of what makes them tick when you have, 5 levels of bonding conversations and quests and whatnot to go through with them. You get a feel for who they are a lot more, even if they are maybe a little bit more subdued than in past games. They're still very much these larger than life figures.
And it's my understanding that I'm jumping a little bit ahead here in terms of the game mechanics, but once
I think that's allowed.
Yeah. Once you actually, it's very much allowed, and exactly what I'm going to be talking about. Once you choose a path, you can go, and you complete it straight to the end. But the game does offer a remarkable amount of flexibility to go back to previous missions and previous story events to choose new ones. So it's not like you need to play the game from scratch each time, is it? Like you actually can explore the various story paths with your, I guess, main save file, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, you basically follow a linear story for your first playthrough, so it does feel like that semi-choice driven RPG experience. This is the first mainline Dynasty Warriors game they've actually marketed as an action RPG, and you can feel that in the DNA. But once you've beaten the game, all of a sudden you're a time traveler, and it is very easy to go and explore the other paths not taken, while taking like the strength you've built up, take them into higher difficulty levels where you can unlock more unique weapons and armor and mounts. There's so much that you can unlock and do while you're going and experiencing the branches you didn't take, that not only is this a robust amount of content, it feels deeper than a lot of that replayability has felt in the past, because the stuff that you're doing can feel a lot more different from the stuff you were starting with.
Okay, let's talk about the combat here, because as you mentioned, this is the first one that is being marketed explicitly as an action RPG, and part of the way that is being implemented is through the weapons. So there are 10 weapons, and each one introduces very different play styles mechanically that greatly differs from the previous games in terms of it was just like a combo system, essentially. So you need to actually learn how to use each one of these weapons and master them over time as well to, beat the game, essentially.
Yeah, which I think is utterly brilliant, the way that they implemented this, because first off, yeah, all of these weapons feel different. When you use the sword, it feels like, oh, this is the Dynasty Warriors that I'm used to. You press combinations of square and triangle to chain together different types of combos. But each time you unlock a new weapon, they get a little bit weirder and a little bit weirder. There's no traditional combo structure with the spear. It's more about how you can engage these big multi-hit attacks from different parts in your combo. They end up, your strong attack works the same, but you can weave it into your combo in different ways. Eventually you're getting stuff like chakrams that you throw out and they stay out dealing damage, and if you press strong attack when they come back in, you do a special attack. It feels utterly unique from anything you've seen and makes almost a mini game out of the combat. Or your staff, that like when you do that triangle attack, you hold it down and all of a sudden you're like running through enemies, swinging that thing all over the place and taking down hundreds of people at a time, as it's kind of the crowd clearing weapon. And there's this tendency that I think people would fall into to pick their favorite weapon and go with it. But your character's level is dependent on your mastery level for each one of those weapons. And, each level gets a little bit harder to master. So you're really encouraged to constantly be switching your weapons as you're sitting there mastering them, so that your character level, your HP, your attack, your defense, all those things are raising at a commensurate rate. Otherwise you're not going to be able to tackle the next story mission. So it really does encourage you to like, hey, experiment with everything, learn to use everything, and they'll even unlock more important functions to how the weapon actually works as you level up your skill in them. All of a sudden you're dealing with like perfectly timed charge attacks that deal extra damage, or multiple different stances with the gauntlets that can change, your entire play style, which is utterly unbroken ground for the series.
That's great. But I mean, there are a lot here aside from story missions. For example, I know that you mentioned, okay, they've gotten away from the concept of the open world, but there still is a full world map that you can explore. I've seen some footage of it, which is hilarious because it looks like a bit of a model, but your character is just this massive person on a horse.
And it feels more like an old school RPG world map where like the towns that you would walk into are like big, but when you're exploring the world map, they're roughly twice as big as you are. That's about it. And it adds to that feeling. But, as you're wandering around, there are resources to gather. There are random fights that pop up that have an effect on like overall piece ratings and can help you level up, can help you do quests, as well as more specific side quests that pop up that have different icons, have different ways of displaying, that will unlock you actual meaningful things. Maybe you'll unlock more members to your personal guard, which opens up more tactics, or maybe you'll find a new horse or a new weapon skill. There are all kinds of things that you can unlock, both through normal progression and through finding special skills. So I mean, I spent a good portion of my time running around that world map and looking for, okay, is there an important fight I should go to? Do I need to do a few skirmishes, or is there someone to talk to on the world map who I can increase my bond with? There are just so many avenues of progression in this game that you would not expect. It makes sense out of why this is a single character, because it's integral to how you grow, is that you're mastering all these weapons at once, and that you're you're working within these skill trees, and everything that you're doing is very much geared towards a long arc of growth for a single character rather than just a linear level structure for 70 of them.
Yeah, and I mean, there's about, what would you say, about 45, 50 hours of content here, but there is a considerable post game as well.
Correct. It took me about 50 hours to 100% my first route. Some people have been getting it done a little bit quicker than that. I take my time. I do a lot of exploring. I like to make sure I don't miss anything.
That's how we review games here at RPG Fan. We actually play them.
We play them like we want to like them, which is fun. I really appreciated that on this one because, as we've said, I adored it.
That's kind of how whenever I play Like a Dragon game, I'm like, I could probably get through this in, like, I don't know, 15 hours, but like, what's the point of reviewing a Like a Dragon game if you're not going to just mainline all of the side content?
And if I don't get a little bit of time to go play Virtua Fighter, it's like I didn't even play a Like a Dragon game.
Exactly. And it's the same thing here. There's so much side content that contributes to the overall thing that if you were to skip it and just hit the main game, you'd be missing a massive part of what you're reviewing.
Exactly. And that's not even including
learn how to play baseball.
And what was so amazing about this was just the amount of things that unlock after you beat the game the first time. I wasn't able to get through anywhere near all of it in time for review. I'm still playing it because this game's amazing. I'm going to be playing it for a long time. But easily like double the amount of content that was in the main game. Not to mention, there are true ending things that you can go for that you might get on the first time, but are pretty difficult. There are these branching paths. There are more people to build your bonds with, not to mention just the fact that new characters are unlocked, new conversations, new weapons, new everything is unlocked after you beat the game. So it's not just like you're repeating these to see everything. You're going through these different routes, but the whole time you're still unlocking new things. Your level cap is up. There's so much extra stuff to do that it's not just a post game. It's a robust, meaningful post game.
Unfortunately, there can be some issues to getting to that post game in the sense of just basic performance issues. This is something that we don't like talking about, but we have to. So we reviewed the PC port, and you had some issues with it, despite having a system that should have been able to handle it readily.
Yeah, my system was well above the minimum recommendations. It automatically was like, hey, you should do this on high. You've got the performance for it. But frame rate issues were very prevalent. There were some... which is rough in a Dynasty Warriors game. In some ways, it's nostalgic. The PS2 games always ran like slideshows, but not kind of what you want with a more timing-heavy system. And I know that some people have had good luck with this. Koei Tecmo has a sorted past with PC ports, and from what I hear, this is one of the better ones. But it absolutely shows that even with a robust system, there are chances of this not working for you for reasons that are, if not impossible to figure out, certainly take a lot of time. I definitely spent a non-trivial amount of time getting this to run as well as I could. But I still had issues like, frame rate drops constantly. I couldn't imagine trying to do the highest difficulty that unlocks at that frame rate with the closer parry timing. Levels where it was raining were basically like pure luck. I went and over leveled like crazy, specifically for raining levels. We had weird sound syncing issues where the next line would start in a pre-rendered cutscene before it was supposed to, and it would cut off that line and restart it from there, which made for some really awkward cutscenes, as well as just like larger frame rate issues in those cutscenes that unfortunately, there's this really big climactic moment at the end of the Wu storyline that just didn't hit at all because the whole thing was just chugging along, moving in slow motion. The sound was kind of desyncing. I think that there's room for this PC port to get better. It's definitely better than some of the past ones that they've done. But I started playing it on PS5 after I was done with the review, and it's night and day how much better this works on a system that it was kind of geared towards initially. So
that's always the trick when it comes to PC ports. There's so many different configurations, and it's so much easier just to optimize it for a single console.
Exactly.
Or multiple consoles, I guess, if you want to release it on an Xbox. Although, to be fair, now that an Xbox is anything,
yeah,
optimize it for your microwave, I guess.
I will say the one benefit, there is a demo out there for it. You can see how it runs on your PC before you go out and buy it. The only thing I'll say is it won't show you, the cutscene experiences that I had. So that's a little trickier, but
yeah. Well, okay. Would you say that this is? I know we talked a little bit earlier how they're like, we might go back into we don't know if there's a mainline entry or not. How would you say? Do you think that? I mean, it's called Origins. Do you think that this really is a starting place for future games in the series?
I hope so. I know that they are going to make more like this. If I were, to bet, I would say we're probably going to get 2 more games in the Origins vein.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get Dynasty Warriors Odyssey, and then we're gonna get Dynasty Warriors Valhalla, and presumably we'll never get Dynasty Warriors Shadows, but
no. That's a Samurai Warriors game that's just going to be in development hell forever. It's because the story only goes up to the Battle of Cherby, which is relatively early in the storyline of the Three Kingdoms. We're definitely getting at least one more that's going to finish this because it's been too wildly successful for them not to, and there are a lot of places where it's obvious they were holding on to things for future games. In interviews, they've even talked about how, we wanted to put this character in, but they would really shine in the next game, and we didn't want to overload this one. So they were hanging on to certain things. And a lot of the weapons that you wield in this game are a lot more like traditional Chinese kinds of weapons, with a couple of exceptions. I could see them taking a sequel or sequels as the opportunity to get a little more weird with it and bring out the tonfas and the metal canoes and the park benches, the real deep cut weapons from the series.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for playing through this, and you did play through it despite one of the things that happens in the background, of course, when we're working with reviewing these games is performance issues and things like that, because we often don't get the final version that's released. We get we get a review copy, and review copies, there's often day one patches and things to fix things up, understandably, and you managed to work your way through that, and I'm really, really glad that you enjoyed the game.
The fact that the game hit this hard even with those performance issues is a testament to exactly what they've put together here.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. It looks fantastic too. It's a gorgeous looking game.
Not to mention, a lot of the design work that went into it, the new character designs, the new weapon designs are a step above, a cut above what they've done before in a lot of ways. So absolutely gorgeous.
Neat. Okay, well, we're going to pivot now from one long-running series to one even longer-running series. So this Dynasty Warriors came out in 1997, which is, it was 1997, wasn't it? It was PlayStation. Yeah, 97. So we're going back 10 more years to Ys. The Ys series launched in 1987, and originally it was known for a rather innovative combat system at the time, which was bumping into enemies. While you'd normally consider this a way to get damage, in Ys, you would bump at them from an angle, and this unique system is, of course, a relic of the past, and it's been replaced by more traditional action RPG gameplay in more recent titles. So, a remaster of a rather loved Ys title just came out. It's Ys Memoire, The Oath in Felghana. This is a remaster version of The Oath in Felghana, which is in itself a reimagining of the original Ys 3 Wanderers from Ys. So, the original Ys 3 came out in 1989, and while the previous 2 games were overhead action RPG of the time, this pulled in Adventures of Link, and it offered a side-scrolling adventure, and this went over just about as well as the Adventures of Link did. A lot of criticism with moving away from the established formula, and of course they returned to it. So when it was remade into the Oath of Felghana in 2005 for the PSP, it changed it into more of an isometric action RPG with modernized combat, expanded its exploration, better world building than an NES could possibly do, and it was received much, much, much warmer than the original Ys 3. We actually have 3 very old reviews on the site, ranging from 85 to 96. This was before my time. My money says that it was probably closer to an 85 than a 96, but anyway, so now we have this big remaster, improved visuals, updated audio, a voiced main character in some places, which is weird because he's traditionally a silent protagonist. And you can switch between modern and nostalgic style. So, Abe, you reviewed Oath of Felghana. I'm just going to call it Felghana. Yeah. And
Keep it simple.
yeah, keep it simple. It's a bit of a title. The Ys series likes their titles. So, how did it improve on the previous iteration of this game from a visual and performance perspective?
Well, I would say that the actual performance the performance was probably the biggest improvement, really, for the new version of the game. Basically, it moves faster and smoother. Especially in handheld mode, it's particularly sharp. Higher resolution just helps things. And the Switch has that over. It's previously on the PSP, so you can definitely upscale things with a modern console. Yeah, even as we're talking, that Switch is about to be not a modern console anymore. But
I mean, argument could be made that it's not right now, but that's another story.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, we definitely see a lot of games that don't run particularly well on the Switch. But Ys definitely does, and that I reviewed the Switch version. There are other versions of the game, but it does still look and run pretty well on the Switch. It's understandable that it runs better in handheld mode, being formerly a PSP game.
And I imagine that that's a reason to get it on Switch. Is like this was on PSP. If you want to relive those days, you want to play it on the Switch handheld mode.
Yeah, and it's bigger, a little bit of a bigger screen. So, yeah, that's definitely the main improvement of the things that have been upgraded for this version. There are also other additions. I don't know if I want to go into this already, but
no, we'll get into it. Yeah. So first off, you can give us the setup for the story, because while this was originally an NES game and stories were somewhat basic on the NES era, it did get a dramatic retelling on the PSP, and that's maintained here. So what happens?
Well, I think the Ys games in general are kind of a little bit more basic on the story front.
True.
Essentially, I think the basic setup for an Ys game is you land in a town, and the main character is Adol Kristen, who's a renowned adventurer. He gets set up in a town, and inevitably people need help, and he decides to help them by killing everything.
The traditional JRPG setup.
Yeah. Adol is he's a silent protagonist, much like Chrono from Chrono Trigger, or we love our silent protagonists in RPGs.
We do.
Yeah. So he doesn't have much to say. He does have a pal, Dogi, who kind of follows him around, and then early on in the game kind of bounces out, and you kind of barely see him for the rest of the game. But this one is a little bit more personal for Dogi, because it happens to be his hometown that the two of them have landed at. So he quickly gets reintroduced to all the people in the town. It kind of acts as a easy in for the player to get introduced to the characters there. And inevitably there's a problem with the area being overrun with monsters, and so Adol decides to go help. And this leads to a series of events that eventually leads up to some kind of world-ending catastrophe that he has to prevent by the end.
Of course, it's a JRPG.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
But it is an action JRPG, and I've seen footage. Obviously, you are no longer bumping into enemies here. But what's the combat system like here? So it's isometric. It's you got your sword. How is it?
It's also very simple. I think the simplicity works pretty well for it in this case. In terms of coming off the first two games, I think that in general the combat when you're kind of wandering around the general world is it's still pretty simple, and I would say it's still pretty cathartic, kind of comforting, satisfying, nothing too stressful. It's definitely it definitely follows the RPG conventions, and you're not going to find anything too out of the ordinary. Your moveset is pretty simple. It's you can mash on the attack button to do a combo. You can also jump, and that's about it, honestly, for the basic moveset. Eventually, pick up a few spells, which honestly kind of you don't really use those in standard combat so much. Those are generally more for the bosses and for interacting with the world, solving puzzles and things. But yeah, it's pretty simple overall. But it's slightly deeper than it is at first glance. So you can do a jump attack, which does extra damage and has a chance of stunning the enemies. And once you get the double jump, you have a better chance of stunning the enemies and doing more damage when you do a jump attack. So, eventually you get to the point where you start, trying to jump attack everything because
it's just so effective.
It's got the added benefits. It's kind of fun, fun trying to line up the attack. But the main thing that makes Ys cool is how it plays with like traditional RPG conventions, which is weird because it kind of the original game kind of predates like traditional RPG conventions anyway. So, so you don't have like traditional healing items. When you defeat enemies, you pick up bonuses generally. Even like for every time you hit an enemy, it racks up your experience bonus a little bit. So it's best to keep pushing. It encourages you to like if you're in a dungeon, it encourages you to keep pressing forward to try and maximize your bonuses. In addition to experience, enemies also drop attack and defense bonuses that last for a short period of time. So you can roll up a pretty good a build just going out and fighting enemies, and definitely encourages you to keep pushing forward instead of thinking about the kind of traditional thing where you kind of think, I'm starting to take on damage. Should I head back to town with my gold and restock and regroup? And the other thing is that, again, you don't have traditional healing supplies in your inventory, but enemies do drop healing supplies for you. So there's a constant kind of thought between, okay, do I continue to proceed or head back to town? Because like the next enemy I fight could restore my health completely, or there could be a save point around the corner that's going to restore my health completely. So maybe I should just keep going. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe one of the enemies I fight on the way back will give me the healing that I need. So it's a pretty fun, kind of gives you a constant kind of thought of whether, which way to go, whether to keep pressing forward or head back.
And I imagine, I haven't played the other Ys games, but in terms of just this one, I imagine that the idea of getting health from slain enemies might be a relic in many ways of the side-scrolling nature of the original game, because that's something that happens in most side-scrollers. You kill an enemy, you get a little health, especially in a Metroidvania.
Yeah. The other thing is like, compared to recent action games, you don't have a traditional dodge either. The only thing you can do to move out of the way of enemies is jump.
The dark ages before dodge mechanics became known.
Right, yeah. So the game uses that a lot in creative ways. You often have to jump over enemies' attacks in order to avoid them instead of dodge out of the way. That's a little bit different. It does feel like a little bit of a relic, but I think the game still uses. I think it still uses everything it has pretty well. So.
And much like a side-scrolling Metroidvania, even though this is not a Metroidvania, there are some Metroidvania elements in this game. For example, the game has a double jump. And like you mentioned, spells are used for environmental exploration, platforming, and puzzle solving more so than they are used for traditional combat. Or in the case, I understand they're also used for some bosses. How did you find the... I don't know. Have you ever played the original, like the real original, like the Ys 3?
No,
I don't think you
it was,
don't. Need
it was
to.
only released in Japan. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious Can you see the DNA of that in this game's gameplay?
Oh, absolutely. It's mainly in like the level design, but which also translates to the gameplay as well. It feels like it's designed like as even though it predates Castlevania. So, calling it a Metroidvania is kind of weird too. But yeah, so like even in the redesign of this game, it's like when you're running around in the main world, it's a little bit more open. So the developers definitely took advantage of being able to have a more 3D environment. But in a lot of the dungeons, it's basically running down like narrow corridors. So and there is a lot of platforming, so it does feel in a lot of ways like a Metroidvania game. The ways that the paths branch is usually either vertical in some way. So you could imagine like playing the original game and maybe there's a door where you press up to go through the door and that takes you to the next room. But instead of that, it's a more open design where you actually just go up instead of going through it.
Yeah.
But there's also plenty of there are also platforming sequences, which in general I'm not a huge fan of. But I do like that there's no point in Oath of Felghana where you're gonna jump into a hole and die.
Okay.
In fact, in a lot of cases, the dungeons are pretty excellently designed. Like, they're very like intricate, and there's a lot of different pathways and a lot of different ways around. Even though it does feel like more of a Metroidvania than like a more modern action game.
There are Metroidvania elements. That's all.
Yeah. But yeah, in fact, a lot of times you actually do need to fall into the hole in order to get to the place where you need to go to get like the next item that you need. So, in general, I think in this game you're encouraged to try things, not to take on like a defensive mindset when you're doing stuff, but to continually push forward and try to make that jump over that huge gap there.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, you eventually pick up a double jump, and one of your spells is the wind spill, which like you do like a spin attack, but also can carry you over a short distance. So eventually, you need to be doing essentially like these triple jump sort of things.
Jump, whoosh.
Yeah, right. So yeah, that's how it would be more like more of a traditional Metroidvania,
a platformer
exploration. Yeah.
One of the ways that this game, I mean, this is not a remake. I mean, it is a remake, but this version's not a remake. It's a remaster from the PSP game. But there are quite a few enhancements here as compared to the PSP. One of them being the character artwork, which you have new character artwork when they talk. You can switch back and forth between them. Also, there is now this is a strange choice. Your main character can sort of talk now, but it's not really like he has monologues or anything like that, but he's kind of talking. And obviously the soundtrack sounds better than ever. So how do you find these particular, improvements improved the overall feeling of the game for you?
I think the improvements are rather slight. Okay. It's a great game. Like, so it doesn't need a lot of improvements anyway. The main thing with the art is the character portraits are more modern looking. They have a more hand drawn look. The original portraits you can switch back to them if you want to in this version of the game, but they're definitely very 2005 looking. By today's standards, they're pretty, I would say, unique looking. There's the weird like thing that developers tried to do like in the 2000s when they had limitations on their on the hardware. They would try to try to make things look a little more 3D-ish by giving them a weird corner sort of rounded look. And the original portraits, because of that, the original portraits look pretty strange by today's standards. or if you are old enough that you remember like stuff from 2005, it definitely is a throwback to that time. And I don't know that I don't think that very many people would prefer to have the original portraits.
I am old enough to remember, and weirdly remember very little.
Yeah, right. But so the hand-drawn look is much more modern, and I think it would appeal to more. It appeal to audiences today much more. It's more in line with the more recent Ys games. So I think that probably is a good change, even though I don't know if it's particularly necessary.
And that's the reason for these remasters. That's the reason for remasters in general. Often it's just to toss in just enough quality of life improvements and just a polish so it doesn't feel awkward or just painful, frankly, when you go back to one of the earlier entries of the game. You want players to feel like, oh, I can see the seams here, but this is a modern entry, even though it technically wasn't.
Right, and you want a little bit more conformity with, since Ys is still going, you want a little more conformity with the more recent releases. In terms of adult talking, it's particularly strange. I kind of, the whole like silent protagonist thing is kind of something we've learned to deal with as RPG fans. It's endearing to a degree, but it's also kind of weird. But it's not like they wrote. It's not like they wrote a part for Adol in here. He initially didn't have any lines at all. And so in this game, in story segments, he's really limited to saying small phrases like, actually, in response to...
Oh my God, he's an incel.
Yeah, right. In response to... in response to the fully voiced writing of the... that you mainly get in the cutscenes and the talking scenes. So it's a strange addition. And especially like, if you have played a lot of games with silent protagonists, like personally, I prefer to imagine that they really, like in Chrono Trigger, that Chrono really doesn't speak at all. He only interacts with people by, these weird like facial expressions. So if you're weird like me, you kind of this kind of breaks that, and I think that's in some ways a loss. But overall, it's not it's not intrusive. It doesn't hurt anything. It's just that I think it loses a little bit of the mystique and the flavor of the character being a little more mysterious, I guess.
I'm 100% on the same page about silent protagonists. I still think that one of the greatest lines in video game history is GLaDOS referring to Chell in Portal as a dangerous mute lunatic. And I've always liked applying that to other silent protagonists. I just like the idea of Chrono being like a dangerous mute lunatic and like all of the monsters being terrified of him because he's just silent.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like part of Chrono's charm is being silent, and so he's endearing to the other characters as well, I think.
Except for because I want to avoid comments in the comment section. Except for a single line in one of the endings. Yes, Chrono does say something in a single line in one of the endings.
So, but again, like that's another. I can understand that choice for the sake of conforming to the more recent Ys games, helping to ease people into it a little bit more. I just don't know that the execution of that works particularly well. It comes off as a little strange. The sound is excellent. I mean, the soundtrack is amazing.
Yeah, I've heard it has one of the better soundtracks, or one of the best soundtracks from the series.
Yeah. I think the voice acting is all pretty great. It has kind of a mixed reputation, I know. Some of the characters are particularly more hammy. I could think of at least one that might fit into a David Lynch movie or Twin Peaks or something. Who has a guy who has a predilection towards butter.
Oh,
and that's really all you need to know. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of appreciate the kind of diverse approaches to the characters that the voice actors took in this game. So I like that it sounds much clearer in the with modern sound. And also the soundtrack is incredible. It's just a tour de force of so many different styles of music. It's awesome to slay enemies, to wild heavy metal, and it's just as awesome to slay enemies to classical inspired pieces. So yeah, it really helps the the energy of the game.
Okay. I want to move on now to something else. We were talking about a few minutes ago. We were talking about how various developers put in quality of life features into old things to make them more accessible and better for current gamers. And with that transition, I would like to introduce you to the Switch 2. I'm still disappointed it's not called the Super Nintendo Switch. I know why it's not, because the Super Nintendo was not what it was called in Japan, but I still think it would have been just a ridiculously good name. But the Switch 2 has been revealed. We had massive number of leaks throughout the months of December and January, to the point where there was nothing in this reveal that actually made anyone go, ooh, I didn't know that was there. And because of that, arguably, this could have been slightly underwhelming. But I would like to hear your opinions on this before I chime in with my own. What do you think?
I'm excited for the Switch 2, just in theory. But there's nothing about this reveal that made me go like, "Oh my god, I'm so excited now. There's something I absolutely need." Yeah, the idea of a new Mario Kart potentially being a launch title, not bad.
It'll sell consoles.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that'll get my son wanting the Switch 2 on day one. The thing that makes me want the Switch 2 on day one is that full backwards compatibility, in hopes that finally Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity runs at a frame rate that I can play at. So I can keep playing one of the best Muso games out there.
It would be nice if backwards compatibility isn't done through some backwards thing where they're trying to get the processor to just do something that it was never designed to do. If it could it's just a faster Switch. That way, all performance across the board is better. That's what I hope for.
It's that idea that like I would have bought a Switch Pro if one were offered. So if this offers me little more than a Switch Pro at launch, it still might be worth it at launch for me. I don't know that I'm going to get a whole lot of use out of mouse functionality for the Joy-Cons or whatnot, but Nintendo surprised me before, so I'm willing to be convinced. I know that there's a lot of concern about how fragile those connectors for the new Joy-Cons look, but I don't know. Nintendo has a lot of experience in making really robust, hardy hardware. So I'm not like doom and gloom about it just yet, even though, yeah, I had that same thought. Ultimately, I think it's just, I'll be excited in April. I think it's nice to have a look at it, but that doesn't like move the needle for me too much. Looks fine. Looks like a game console.
Yeah. How about you, Abe?
Well, I think the Joy-Cons actually might be nice with it looks like they have looks like it's going to be like a magnetic connector to port them into the actual main Switch. That'd be a lot better than having to slide them into the thing.
Agreed. I think there's some usability there.
For some people have like shredded their Joy-Cons doing that. So I mean, like the better hardware overall is like is definitely the biggest thing. Like even games that are on the Switch, like I mean, like the most recent Zelda game, what's it called? Sorry, Jono.
Echoes of Wisdom or Tears of the Kingdom?
Wisdom, sorry, yeah.
I was going to say the one before that, Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
right.
That one.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, like, already, that's having trouble running on the Switch, so, like, being able to have that, I'm doubting we're getting 60 FPS, but, like, being able to run that on a platform that's a little bit more capable is a bonus in itself. But like, I like a lot of the small additions to the hardware. I like the built-in kickstand. And if they can make Joy-Cons that don't have the drift problem, that would be nice.
Yeah, I guess it depends. I wonder if they've upgraded the analog sticks.
Yeah, I don't know.
Part of me wants to trust that they would put some effort into it, some extra effort into it after the Calamity last time.
You'd hope so.
You would think.
You would think.
I mean, the Switch Pro controller is great, so like it doesn't have those problems. So they should be able to design Joy-Cons that, and it would be for my big, long, lanky fingers. It would also be nice if they were a little bit bigger. So
those Joy-Cons
that's one thing
I'm
hoping for.
Children's toys.
Yeah.
So they are children's toys technically.
If they did, if they did make them the quality of like the Switch Pro controller, that'd be mean, that'd be perfect, pretty much.
It looks like they're putting some effort into it, so
Yeah, it does. But yeah, I think they'll be able to do a lot more with, whatever their next first person titles, big person titles are going to be. Like, obviously they're going to have a little bit more power to work with, and that's obviously what we need.
yeah.
I'm also the Switch has touch controls, and they've never I'm surprised Nintendo never really made a game that like utilized those. You think they would, and I kind of hope that for the Switch 2 they come up with something that really tries to dig into that a little bit. I mean, I think that and it's not RPG related, but I do think the Switch kind of needed its its Wii Sports sort of game to really just show off the hardware. So I'm kind of, I don't know if that's really the direction Nintendo's interested in going in, but I would be interested to see if they could come up with something like that.
I am simultaneously excited and underwhelmed by this reveal. I think that the overwhelming sense of, fine, we'll release the trailer is, I know it's there, I feel it too, but I think it was just because of all of the leaks. I think there's a lot of secrets about this console that we don't know yet, and things that have been hinted at. For example, the Joy-Cons going around the table like the light bikes in Tron. I mean, a lot of people have been speculating that it could be mouse support, which could be real interesting for FPS games. But I think that Nintendo always puts something into their systems that make them different. Like, they had two options here with the Switch, really. They could have gone with the Switch 2, or they could have gone with a massive departure. And it's understandable why they went with the Switch 2. It's not just because it's their best-selling console, but also because they don't really want to let go of the branding, which is golden. Yeah, I'm excited for this thing. I can't wait for it. It's just a bigger, more powerful Switch. I'll take it. I am going to be curious how long this thing sticks around. That's my big question, because although there have been some leaks about the system on a chip that's on it, and it's good, it's pretty good, that people are saying that's going to be basically a portable PlayStation 4 in terms of its power. But the hardware is apparently already not cutting edge. So I don't know if this is going to last quite as long as the Switch did. I hope it doesn't last as long as the Switch did, because that console is a potato now. But we'll see. It was a pretty good reveal. It had Nintendo's usual kind of playful demeanor and presentation, and we'll see what happens in a few months when we get some more announcements of launch titles. I would expect that given how long we have been waiting for this, if this thing doesn't have an avalanche of launch titles coming out, I would be surprised.
I hope so.
I fully expect this year we'll get Mario Kart 9 or whatever it's called. I would be stunned if we didn't get a new Mario platformer. I would be stunned if we did not get a couple of remasters of either Wii U or heck, even very early Switch games. It's going to be an interesting year for a variety of reasons, but also because the Switch 2 is coming out, and that's exciting. That is an exciting thing that happened. Amidst a lot of, it's difficult to even put into words the kind of month January has been so far, and it's not done yet. And in that spirit, I kind of wanted to say a few words about the passing of David Lynch, and I suspect that a lot of people have been seeing a lot of this over the last few days on the internet, on pretty much every social media, certainly in the news, talking about how much David Lynch meant to them, analysis of his work, his where he came from in terms of his creativity. For me, my first exposure was the Twin Peaks DVD first season set that came out in the early 2000s. And I bought it and I watched the first episode, and I was confused. And not just because it was David Lynch, it's because the pilot episode wasn't included in the set because of rights issues. So I got the second episode. And I managed to track down a really, really worn down VHS copy of it, and I watched the crap out of it. I loved it. Some of my fondest memories of him was my friend Donnie and I, we finished watching the first season, and at that stage of the game, there was no second season out yet. So I would be like trying to download pirated episodes on Kazaa, I think, at like 0.4 kilobytes a second. And
goodness.
It took like months, and we would get like an episode, and it would be like a slow drip for us. And in that time, I actually got who the murderer was, the murderer of Laura Palmer was, spoiled for me. I'm not kidding. Channel surfing. I was just going, and then on A&E, it happened to be the exact scene where it was revealed, and I saw exactly who it was, and I was like, "Oh, you're kidding me!" But later, it occurred to me that, especially once I started watching the second season, it didn't matter. I'm not telling you who it is, by the way, because I don't want to spoil it the same way. But honestly, it in a lot of ways, it didn't matter who the answer to the question who killed Laura Palmer, because for David Lynch, it was always about the question. The questions were always more interesting to him. And certainly if you've watched Twin Peaks Season 3, you know that he has left us with questions that will be talked about forever. His work deeply touched me, both in terms of watching it and in terms of the way he wrote. One of the books, when I started becoming an artist, his book Catching the Big Fish had a significant impact on the way I approach my creativity. I never got into meditation in the same way that he talks about, but some of the ideas in that book really touched me, and I feel like they've touched a lot of artists who work in so many different fields, not just film, but also comics, video games, obviously, music. He was a unique figure, and what he has left us with, both in terms of his filmography, in terms of the music that he collaborated on, in terms of his books, in terms of just his YouTube videos, where he delivers a weather report every day during the pandemic. It's such a wealth of material that I think will be appreciated by future generations. I think a lot of filmmakers, they're going to be not forgotten, but their work will fade. I don't think that's going to be the case with David Lynch. I think it will continue to go on. And I'm very sad that he passed. I'm very, very sad that he passed. Usually celebrity deaths don't impact me, but the day that I found out about David Lynch, I was inconsolable. It really hit me hard. Anyway, do either of you, I know that Abe, you were drinking a nice black coffee. Do either of you have anything to say about David Lynch?
It's obvious that, especially, I think in Japanese games, I think David Lynch had a huge influence on creators and creativity in terms of video games. I do think that, you can see it in, like, even like Silent Hill and
Link's Awakening.
A number of Link's Awakening. But I mean, Western games too, obviously. I mean, Alan Wake.
Pretty much all of Remedy's games are very inspired by David Lynch.
I always felt like David Lynch is one of those creators who, even if you think you don't know him, you kind of do, because you've seen his fingerprints all over so many things. And it's not just the creative process, which is huge for David Lynch, just like an artist's artist in every sense of the word, who very much was constantly standing up for his visions, his morals, like everything about David Lynch was someone who was kind of unapologetically themselves without ever, I think, seeming like they were callous or uncaring about others, because David Lynch has this wild streak of empathy throughout his work there. The downtrodden, the underserved, the underprivileged are constantly lifted up by his work. I mean, the quote, "Fix your heart or die," is just like, it is a mantra to live by.
Yeah. Especially now.
Yeah. Even more important than ever before. And Lynch was on that well before this was on, the greater public's radar. Not to mention just the imagination that captured so many people, where even when people didn't pick up on some of the moral, the ethic, the message underneath the message, that just kind of seemed to shine through anyways, because the creativity of storytelling and kind of that weird mix of excess of style, but still kind of economic storytelling is like always impressive, where things can breathe, but you never feel like there's not a purpose to what's being shown you, but that purpose, unlike a lot of thoughts today sometimes go, doesn't have to be in service to the main story. It can be in service to an emotion. It can be in service to a character. It can be in service to a message.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in service to something that you're not sure you understand, but there's definitely something there. I found my love for Lynch with the original Dune movie, actually. His wild interpretation of Dune, that while still utterly bizarre in a lot of ways, is like unfathomably entertaining, creative, this unique view that I think still holds up today. And, you know, his partnership with Kyle MacLachlan is the stuff of legends at this point. Yeah, this one hit me harder than a lot. I mean, not just in the creativity in his works, but just in him as a human being. I mean, to this day, you know, Friday is always met with a, if you can believe it, it's a Friday once again. Like that's just part of my Friday routine.
I'm not kidding. Those YouTube videos are going to go down in history as forever as one of the best pieces of his work.
There is no chance of David Lynch ever being forgotten.
No.
This one was one where, like, I knew the health problems. I knew that this was going to happen sooner than later, but it's still so affecting. And I think we're all going to be kind of feeling the echoes of this for a long time. And with any luck, maybe it emboldens people to kind of take some of the torch from Lynch, and not necessarily in just echoing what he did, but in that reckless sense of self, that belief in your own vision to like go and chase it down and make something beautiful, you know?
I certainly hope so. Okay, well, pivoting away from that, and there's no way to transition this in a way that won't feel callous, so I'm just going to do it. If you're looking for a way to support us here at RPG Fan, we've opened up a store. You can find it at www.rpgfan.com/shop. Lots of things on there. We have mugs, we have magnets, we have lots of clothes, but we also have our collaboration with Hyperplay RPG, the RPG Fan Review Card Collection, which is a showcase of nearly 300 of our review cards, as you can see on Instagram and other social media channels. Yeah, check that out. I am a massive fan of this book. I have 2 copies on my shelf. I'm in it, and I love it. Another way you can support us is to check out our past episodes of Random Encounter. And our last episode, I wasn't here, but I did edit it. And I think that Zach, the new full-time host of Retro Encounter, did a fabulous job stepping in to cover me. I am incredibly appreciative to him to do that. I think it was a great episode and a great way to start the year. Speaking of Retro Encounter, Zach's first episode as the full-time host is out, and it's focused on Final Fantasy IX, which is many folks' favorite JRPG, and for very good reason. And just a reminder, Retro is now moving to a twice-monthly format, so you can expect part 2 of this episode to come out next week. We also have Random Encounter, which is RPG Fans' music podcast. Last episode was it was an episode that didn't really have a theme. It was focused on brand new music from RPGs that didn't quite fit into our usual themes. And you can actually expect more of these in the upcoming year, with smaller panels showcasing about 6 to 8 songs each. I think this episode was super, super fun. There's some really, really great music in it, so check that out. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can fire us off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com. Would love to hear from you, whether you have ideas for future episodes, whether you want to talk about discussion questions, anything you'd like to share at all, please, fire me off a message. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to contact with me personally, you can do so at jlogan@rpgfan.com. You can also find me on Blue Sky at jonologan.bsky.social. I'm not the only person on here with a social media presence. Wes, where can we find you?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Lone Weasel.
Excellent. And Abe, where can we find you?
You can also find me on Blue Sky at Babe Moby, or if you want to, on Instagram at A. Kobolansky.
Cool. I really want to thank both of you for coming on today and spending the time talking about these games, certainly taking the time to play and review these games. It's January, beginning of a new year.
Sounds like we both kind of pulled winners for our first reviews of the year, so I'm not complaining.
Yeah, you're 100% right.
For sure. Yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends. Helps get the word out there. And you can rate us on iTunes or your other podcast player of choice. Again, thank you everyone on here for joining me today. Thank you everyone out there for joining us today. And everyone listening, whatever you're playing, have fun.